Assistant Secretary of the Navy is the title given to certain civilian senior officials in the United States Department of the Navy. From 1861 to 1954, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy was the second highest civilian office in the Department of the Navy. The role has since been supplanted by the office of Undersecretary of the Navy, and the office of Assistant Secretary of the Navy has been abolished. There have, however, been a number of officers bearing the phrase Assistant Secretary of the Navy in the title. At present, there are 4 Assistant Secretaries of the Navy, each of whom reports to and assists the Secretary of the Navy and the Undersecretary of the Navy. Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Assistant Secretary of the Navy. The General Counsel of the Navy is equivalent in rank to the 4 Assistant Secretaries. History. The office of the Assistant Secretary of the Navy was established in 1861 to provide a senior deputy to the Secretary. The Assistant Secretary was responsible for the Navy's civilian personnel, as well as for administration of shore facilities. Gustavus Fox was the first to hold the post, serving throughout the Civil War. The office was disestablished in 1869 during Reconstruction, but was re-established by Congress on July 11, 1890. James R. Soley was the first to be appointed to the newly re-established position. The Assistant Secretary was the Navy's number 2 civilian until 1940, when Congress established the position of Undersecretary of the Navy, who was given oversight of the Assistant Secretary's activities. James V. Forrestal, later Secretary of Defense, was the first to serve as Undersecretary. He held the post until 1944, when he became Secretary of the Navy. During the 20th century, the responsibilities of the Assistant Secretary were divided among several officials. During the 1920s, for example, to reflect the increasing importance of naval aviation, Congress established the position of Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Air. The office of Assistant Secretary of the Navy was disestablished in 1954. Famous Assistant Secretaries of the Navy. U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy from 1897 to 1898 during the William McKinley administration. U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy from 1913 until 1920, and helped to implement Navy policies during World War I. According to author Edward J. Renahan, Jr., no less than 5 members of the extended Roosevelt clan served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy: Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., who served from 1921 through 1924 under Harding and Coolidge; Theodore Douglas Robinson, who served from 1924 through 1929 under Coolidge; and finally Henry Latrobe Roosevelt, a descendant of Robert Fulton's old friend, Steamboat Nicholas Roosevelt, who served from 1933 through 1936 under FDR. Ralph Austin Bard was Assistant Secretary and then Undersecretary during World War II. Assistant Secretaries of the Navy, 1861 to 1954. Defunct offices bearing the title of Assistant Secretary of the Navy.